A History of Us, Book 2, Chapter 15, Puritans, Puritans, and More Puritans. In 1630, the first Puritan ship, the Arbella, sets out for the New World. By summer's end, 1,000 Puritans have landed in New England. They bring a charter from the king, the charter of the Company of the Massachusetts Bay in New England. King Charles is happy to see the Puritans leave England. The charter is a document written by lawyers, setting the rules that tell how the colony will be run. It allows the colonists to govern themselves. It's important to remember that from the beginning, English settlers expected to govern themselves. It's also important to remember that each colony had a charter, which was a written set of rules. Those charters would evolve into constitutions. Can you guess what might happen in a community without a charter or constitution? Would you like to live in a country without laws? Would you want to write your own laws or have someone write them for you? You can think about those questions and then get back to the Puritans who are beginning to pour out of England. Most of them go to the Caribbean islands, where sugar is creating great fortunes. But between 1630 and 1640, 20,000 Puritans sail for New England. Think about all those people risking their lives to cross the ocean and settle in an unknown land. It is almost as if tens of thousands of people today decided to live in outer space. Why did they come? Many came because they really cared about their religion and wanted to practice it in peace. They wanted to build a holy community where people would live by the rules of the Bible. Puritans believed the Bible to be the whole Word of God. They tried to follow its every direction, which means they tried to live very good lives. Here's two side notes for this page. The first one says, Massachusetts is an Algonquin word, that's a Native American tribe, that means at the big hill. The Puritans called their new home the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The second says, sweet success. Sugar was a much desired luxury in Europe. The West Indies, with its tropical climate, turned out to be a perfect place to grow sugarcane. Christopher Columbus brought the cane to the Caribbean on his second voyage. Soon, the native trees were cut down and sugarcane plantations filled the islands. Sugarcane grew wild in Asia. In Sanskrit, the ancient language of India, sugar was sarkara, that became sukar in Arabic, sakar in Russian, sukur in French, zucker in German, and sugar in English. A third note, which I forgot to mention earlier, talks about John Winthrop, who was a lawyer who lost his job because of what he believed in. And in 1630, he came to America. Although the Puritans tried hard to be good, things didn't work out as they wished. They expected their colony to be an example for all the world. John Winthrop, who was chosen as governor, said, "We must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us." And by city upon a hill, he's making a Bible reference. In one of the parables of the Gospels, Jesus says that a city on a hill cannot be hidden. And John Winthrop is saying here that their colony shall be like that city on the hill for all people to see. One thing they didn't understand at all was the idea of toleration. Puritans came to America to find religious freedom, but only for themselves. They didn't believe in the kind of religious freedom we have today. But don't be too hard on them. Almost no one else believed in it either. And how many people do you know who are willing to devote their lives to an idea they believe to be right? In those days, each nation had its own church, and everyone was expected to pay taxes for its support. Now suppose you didn't believe in the ideas of that religion. Too bad. You had to keep quiet, leave the country, go to jail, or maybe even get hanged. So when you hear the Reverend John Cotton saying toleration is, open quote, liberty to tell lies in the name of the Lord, close quote, you believe it. Since you're convinced that only you Puritans are right, you think it's wrong to let anyone practice another religion. You believe that that's helping the devil. You especially dislike Quakers. Your leaders call them a quote-unquote cursed sect. You use the name Quaker to describe religious people who call themselves quote-unquote friends. Friends believe that each person has an inner light that leads him to God. They believe that people with an inner light do not have to rely on a minister to tell them what is godly. They believe that the inner light is available to everyone. Now, this is a very democratic idea, and so most Europeans thought it was very dangerous. They were used to kings and priests and ministers. It seemed reasonable to them to persecute Quakers. When Quakers came to New England or Virginia, they were whipped, sent away, and even hanged. Remember, you are a Puritan and you've left your home and everything you know and love. You've crossed a fierce ocean to live as you wish. You don't want people with strange ideas bothering you. Democracy is another strange idea. If the people be governors, who shall be governed? The Reverend Cotton asks. John Winthrop, the beloved Puritan governor, who always tries to do what is best, calls democracy the open quote, meanest or lowest and worst close quote, form of government. Side notes. Side note 1. Here's the first page of the Charter of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, setting out the rules by which the colonists could govern themselves. At the top left is King William III. Second note. Once a woman got to the New World, she was expected to start having babies. At first, the name Quaker was used to make fun of people. So too was the word Puritan. Then, both groups decided to be proud of those words and use them themselves. Now back to the reading. And yet the Puritans do practice a kind of democracy, but only for male church members. Once a year they form a general court and vote to elect the governor and council. The general court is a lot like the House of Burgesses, or Parliament, or Congress. Some people call the Massachusetts Bay Colony a quote-unquote theocracy, which is government by church officials in the name of God. But they're wrong. It's not a theocracy. The ministers are the most important people in the colony, but they are not allowed to hold political office. They do not govern. It is a small step toward the idea of the separation of church and state. Someday that idea will be a foundation of American liberty. What's in a word? We'd better stop and go over some words, otherwise this book will be very confusing. You've been reading about democracy and theocracy. Here's an explanation of those ideas and some others too. If you keep reading history, you'll learn about Abraham Lincoln. He said that democracy was government, open quote, of the people, by the people, and for the people, close quote. That's a good definition. Democracy is based on people power. Think of a pyramid with the leader on top and all the people on the bottom. The leader is picked from the bottom row and raised to the top. Power goes from the bottom to the top. You'll see in a minute that in some kinds of government, power goes the other way. Democracy comes in two varieties, direct democracy and representative democracy. When you choose someone to vote for you, you have representative democracy. The members of the House of Burgesses at Jamestown represented the colonists and made laws for them. Our Congress does the same thing for us today. We live in a representative democracy based on law. We are ruled by laws made by congressmen and women whom we elect. Some New England towns had direct democracy. All the people in the town get together at a town meeting and vote directly on important issues. No one votes for them. It's possible with modern technology that we will have more direct democracy in the future. We may be able to vote directly for certain laws through our TV sets or computers. However, we'll always need representatives who can take the time needed to make decisions on complicated issues. Autocracy is the opposite of democracy. It is government by a single authority with unlimited power. In autocracies, power starts at the top of the pyramid. A dictator is an autocrat. If a dictator doesn't like you, he can have you killed without consulting anyone or giving you a trial. Autocrats don't have to be bad. There have been a few good ones in history, but only a few. If a dictator is terrible, the people are stuck with him or her. They have no power except sometimes brute force. In the old days, kings and queens were autocrats. Today, they usually share power with the parliament. A theocracy is, if you don't remember that, go back and read the last chapter. Just kidding, you don't have to do that. A theocracy, remember, is government by a church in the name of God. An aristocracy is a government by a small group of privileged people. Side note here. Maybe you guys know this aristocracy as another word for it, oligarchy, meaning rule by the few. I continue. England was an aristocracy in the 17th century. The king and the landowning aristocrats who controlled parliament ruled. Hold on. This is tough and maybe a bit boring, but it is important. Democracy, autocracy, theocracy, and aristocracy are all words that tell you about political power and who has it. Here are two words that tell about economic or money power: communism and capitalism. In a communist country, the state owns most of the land and property and shares them with its citizens. Remember, the word state sometimes means nation. That can be confusing, but that's the way it is. People don't own their homes or businesses. They work for the state. Jamestown tried a kind of communist system, and so did Plymouth. Both colonies found that people worked harder when they know that they can own land or a business. Open parentheses. In the 20th century, Russia and most of Eastern Europe tried and rejected communism. I may also add, China and some other countries in South America also tried communism. They ended up rejecting most of its principles as well. People often need to be forced to be communist. In a capitalist country, you can own capital. What's capital? Money and property. The United States is a nation that practices capitalism. In a capitalist country, goods are distributed through a free market. Capitalism has disadvantages too. Wealth often piles up for a few people, while others don't have enough. That may be a lot to absorb. Now let's get back to history, which is, to some of us, much more exciting. Side note. Alexis de Tocqueville was a Frenchman who came to the United States in the 19th century. He wrote a book, Democracy in America, that is still one of our best descriptions of our system ever published.